So my name is Ilara Stephanie Gadet. I use they, them pronouns. I'm in Amiskwichi Waskahigan, colonially known as Edmonton, and we are in Treaty 6 territory and home of the Métis Nation.
My name is Lynn Markham. My pronouns are she and her. And I am also in Edmonton.
Okay, so family dynamics. So maybe we could start with the shape of how our family works.
Sure.
Okay, so our family, Lynn just moved in.
Mm-hmm.
Lynn is my girlfriend. She moved in like 3 or 4 days ago on Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been dating since we think April. We've decided April is our anniversary month because who knows what the date is.
We never marked it down.
No. And we are in a polyamorous relationship.
Yep.
So why don't you talk about some of your external family structures and how they work?
Yeah, so polyamorous relationship. I have other partners, I guess. I would say one for sure. And I don't really know what to say. They're good.
They're good relationships.
Yeah.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of keep things separate. What happens, like our relationship is mostly our relationship, right? I try not to bring that into other relationships and vice versa. I try not to bring other things into this relationship as well. And it just seems to work. Lots of good boundaries and making boundaries and sticking to them, and also making new boundaries. Making boundaries are a way of showing love. So
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
And communicating around boundaries. And then the other aspect of, so we're nesting partners.
Yes.
We've kind of always considered ourselves nesting partners, even though we just moved in together. That was like the goal, was to move in together when like very soon after we started dating. And we also live with two of my best friends who Lynn is becoming good friends with. And they are also poly and in multiple relationships outside of their relationships, and they are engaged and nesting partners, and one of them actually owns this home. So the three of us, so like my two friends and I, have lived together for over 4 years now, and we've always considered ourselves a family unit in a lot of ways. And there's always been the hope that I would get a nesting partner to move in with us. And now I have.
And it's happened.
Yeah, and it's wonderful. I currently only have Lynn as my partner, but doesn't mean that I'm not open to other relationships if they occur. But I also am more broad in my definition of quote unquote relationship. Like Lynn is my nesting partner and romantic partner, but I guess I would consider myself a relationship anarchist because I consider all of the people who I love to be equally important. So my friends and family and partners and everybody who's in my life, I consider of equal importance, even though we have different types and dynamics of relationship.
Exactly. That's one thing that I've always, like, in my mind, how I've framed it is that you do have other partners, and that those other partners are mostly, without really saying names because I haven't asked permission, some of the people that you hang out with on a regular basis, like they are, in my mind, a partner, even though it's not a romantic partner or anything like that.
Totally, I have partners in crime.
Exactly.
Many partners in crime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Chosen family. So for me, myself, like I work with a bunch of people in the trade that I work in, and I consider them a family, right? So I have multiple different chosen families. Work is one. I have given family as well, and then another group of friends and even different organizations that I do work for. They're also, I consider them a chosen family as well. So
Yeah, totally.
And now this new chosen family.
Yeah. And I definitely have lots of chosen family within the UU community, but likewise, I didn't ask consent to name them, so I will not.
Mm.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people at work, for me, when I tell them that I'm in a poly relationship, they just think that it's like a free pass to go and have sex with whoever you want, which isn't the case. That's not even close to what poly is like. Relationships are what you make them. So, like we said earlier, I consider a lot of the relationships that Ilara has with other people exactly that, relationships, whether they're romantic or not. That doesn't mean anything. They're important to them to every degree that I'm important to them. So that's one misconception that I've definitely come across a lot. So
yeah, I would agree with that. I consider myself on the asexual scale, which here's some more terms. But anyways, I consider myself on the asexual scale. So like polyamory is not even remotely about sex for me. Like it's very much about relationship and connection and family security and having people you love in your life and like so many things. But sex is like so far off of what it's about for me. And I think that's a very common misconception, is that it's like that, what Lynn said, that it's mostly about sex, and it's a lot about consent. But again, consent is not just about sex. It's about how you talk to each other and how you respect each other's boundaries and having open and clear communication about everything. I think one big misperception that I face a lot, that is not directly about my family structure, but about how I relate to people, is that being non-binary means that I want to change my body in some way, and that's not true. And I think that like how I interact with the world is non-binary, so obviously then by extrapolation, like how I relate with the people in my life is also as a non-binary person. So I feel like that is the most obvious misconception, is just that like being non-binary has something to do with dysphoria, and it doesn't. It's just about how I relate to the world and how I relate to the people in my life and how I relate to myself. But it's not about this. It's, yeah, I have no body dysphoria. I have disability body dysphoria, but I don't have any gender body dysphoria. Yeah. I am very open, and I get misgendered all the time. All the time. I have quite a few people in our community who go to bat for me and who will correct folks, which is great. Like they're my family, right? Like I have a lot of chosen family in our congregation. But I would say 40 to 60% of our congregation misgenders me all the time. And after being corrected, I've identified as non-binary now for, I want to say, at least 4 years. And I have corrected people for over half of that time. And other people in the congregation have corrected people for over half of that time. And we've been doing like non-binary gender workshopping and like education stuff since at least a year before the pandemic. And 100% of the folks on our board, none of them have ever correctly gendered me. So that it's, of course it's an impact. But when it comes to like family structure and relationships, I feel like we're pretty accepting. And I don't know where the misgendering is coming from. I don't know if it's a thing of like just being attached to the way things were, or like not wanting to change something in the language, or where it's coming from. But it's there. It's definitely there. And I have had many conversations with folks in the congregation, in both like from an educator perspective and from like a person who's being misgendered perspective, of like, this this is a barrier. Like, this is a barrier for people. We've had, so my one really, really good friend, who, again, not going to name, don't have consent, but my one really good friend in Westwood, who is also non-binary, excuse me, who Lynn will know who I'm talking about. We've both invited our Two-Spirit LGBTQ plus friends so many times into the congregation, and like nobody ever sticks, ever. And like a big part of that is because they see us being misgendered all the time. So like, how could they possibly feel comfortable in that space? Yeah, so that's a really large barrier. I don't think it's one that we can't overcome, but it is a very large barrier. And it definitely prevents folks who are either of a different gender, or who have family who are of a different gender, or who have like friends who are of a different gender, like seeing that publicly, and it happens publicly all the time, seeing that would definitely make them not want to come back into our communities. If I wasn't like a committed UU, I would, and I like walked into an organization where that was happening, I would not come back, knowing what I know. Yeah. And I had a really interesting conversation with my one other non-binary friend. We talked about the word patience, and we're always told, be patient, like we're just be patient. And we were like, okay, but patience isn't really about waiting or like about time. It's about like in that moment, like if you have a kid who's like biting at the bullet to do something, and you ask them like calmly as a parent or as a guardian to be patient, you're not asking them to wait a month. You're asking them to like in that moment like relax, and like it's a centering and like a calming expression to be patient. It's like a coming into yourself. It's not a like the change will never happen, be patient, it'll take 10 years for this change to happen. Like that's not what patience means. But when it comes to misgendering, that's how it feels, because we're always told to be patient, and like yeah, it's like it's always like a future, oh well eventually we'll get it, but the work doesn't actually happen inwardly in people, and people don't get it any very little more now than they did 4 years ago, frankly.
It's true. Action speaks louder than words, right?
Yep.
And you can be as patient as you want, but if people aren't taking action to correct their pronouns or anything along the lines of gender, wow.
Janitor. Mm.
Along the lines of gender, if people aren't taking action, then nothing's going to happen. You can be patient all you want, but eventually that patience will turn into resentment and anger and fear.
Yep. But you can't be patient forever. Like
it's
about like if you're being told to be patient, that implies there's a change, like that the people are doing the work and the change will happen. But imminent change. But like if there's no change, what am I being patient? Like why am I still being told to be patient? Like I'm not a child. I have been very patient. We have been very patient as non-binary people. Like, yeah, anyway. Yeah. And it's also like, I just want to say, like, it's not like I don't feel like I'm accepted for who I am, because I can't think of anybody who's like been malicious, right? Like within our community in any way, shape, or form. It's just that I'm aware of all of the gender needs being barriers in a way that I think a lot of our older folks are not aware. So like when I get misgendered, yeah, it bothers me because I've been correcting people for 4 years. But more so, it bothers me because I know that that's a barrier for other people coming in. And especially for younger people coming in, like I'm in my 30s, like I know I'm still a young adult technically, but like when I talk about younger people. Like I work with our youth. So like when I'm thinking about like youth who have been through trauma because their parents haven't accepted them when they've come out as being non-binary, or when they've come out as being trans and they're like newly trans, so they're not quote unquote passing yet. Like those are the things that really concern me when folks misgender me and our other non-binary congregant, because I know that that can be super re-traumatizing for people. And like, it's not really traumatizing for me. It's frustrating, but it's not traumatizing. But like, it's a source of trauma in people's lives. And it's a really big barrier to come into a space and be re-traumatized. And it's like not a part of who we want to be. Like, we don't want to be a community who's like harming young people. Like, that's not something we would want to identify as. And I think a lot of folks don't understand that it's that important. Like, it's like something that's like, oh, this new thing, but it's not like really, I don't think it's understood in the depth of its importance in people's lives, especially in young people's lives. So yeah, it's more about that. That's I'm coming at it more from that perspective than like, I don't feel accepted, because I mostly do feel accepted in our congregation. Like, I've been there a long time, and if I didn't feel accepted, I wouldn't still be there. Like, what, 15 years later, 16 years later?
I don't really have much to say about this one. I haven't really been a part of UU that long, so yeah, what is it called? Robert's rules, or those rules? They should just be thrown out the window. It doesn't really matter what organization, but I mean, honestly, it makes it so much more difficult to get decisions done in a timely manner. And it confuses a lot of things. So you want to talk about family and dynamics and stuff, that could be a very valid point. Like, you don't do that within a regular family dynamic. So why would you want to do it within a congregational family?
Yeah, that's a good analysis of the situation. Yeah. I wouldn't be like, oh, we're talking about this question. That means we can't talk about the next question because we're already like, who talks like that? Like, what family makes decisions in that way? Nobody. Nobody I've met anyway. Yeah, and then when you were talking, I had another thing I wanted to say that you sparked.
About
and now
rules?
I don't think so.
About the congregational family?
Maybe. Oh yeah, I think what I wanted to say was just that a lot of the issues that we see within our community are not isolated to our communities. Like, I think like when I think about volunteers being burned out and like volunteer leadership being burned out, like that's a cultural thing, and it's not just a UU cultural thing. Like, I have been on so many boards over the years, which is one of the reasons I refuse to be on our board, because I've been on so many boards over the years, and I'm just like, I have no desire to be in that leadership role because I know how hard it is, because I know how the dynamics work. And the evidence from where our board is at right now, or have been for the past 10 years of me being at Westwood, haven't shown me otherwise. Like, we've burnt out most of our board members in the 10 years that I've been in my position. Yeah, and so like, there are other ways of doing leadership work. You don't have to be in a model where everybody's always exhausted. Like, you can be in a model where you are relating more like family, and like, yeah, the bills have to get paid, but bills have to get paid in family structures too. It doesn't mean that you're like that's the only thing you ever talk about is like, oh my God, if the bills don't get paid, we're not going to have our house. And then like, what will we do as a family? Well, you'll be a family. That's like how it works. That's
Right.
not like where all your energy goes as a family. So yeah, there are other models, and it would be good to look at those models so that our leadership could feel supported and cared and loved for, and like they are in a church family instead of like they're
in charge of it.
in. Well, it's not even about that. It's like the focus of it is so structural instead of relational. It's like just down to business as opposed to like yeah, it is totally, it's very like capitalist mindset of like, if we don't balance the books, we're all going to fall apart. Well, if you stop thinking about balancing the books and like how you enjoy being together, maybe things would fall apart a less, not as badly or as dramatically or etc. Anyway, yeah, there are ways. There are lots of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just really like that analogy of like, this isn't how you would be in your family, so why is this how you're running your church family? I really like that analogy because I do feel like a lot of people at church are family and we don't relate like that. Like we don't, yeah. Familial governing structures, what does that look like? How do we shift to a familial governing structure? Children are welcome in families. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We should have a say in families.
They do, yeah. Anyway. I don't think there's anything else though.